Hello, this is Ted at the Carly office. You knew it would be me responding. Your titles, records for publisher Charles Edwin Jones found 147 titles with this, although the publisher, using the publisher as the keyword to find them, so I think that's a good place to start here. The first 6 or 7 are definitely in the network zone. We'll take a look at those in a second. And then a lot of the rest appear to be in the institution zone. Let me jump up here and do an advanced search. And let us take a look and see exactly how many are linked. This is a physical titles search, by the way. That means physical titles looks for any bib records, whether they're in the network or the institution, that have inventory on them. If they didn't have any inventory on them, then you would need to use the all titles search to find those bib records. Now we can see how many are linked to the network. Because this is physical titles, we're not going to get any electronic resources that are in the community zone. So let's see, physical titles, publishers, Charles Edwin Jones. So about 70 of these bib records are in the network zone. Creation date 3/31, 3/21. Earliest was added by sorting on, well, creation date is not a sorting element. Publication date is, but so we can't quite tell when they all were added, but we can see 70. That's a pretty good thing to do. Now, next question you had is, how did these get from one place to the other? Were they added through your placement settings, or were they added through another means? So this is the first one in the list that's set for now. It says it was created 5/14/2025. So that's when it was added to the network zone and to your institution as well. At the bottom of a record, we can see the information that at the end of the record in the 948 and 994 that tell us how these records were added. It says Z0 ILL. That means that this record was imported through the metadata editor when your placement settings were selected as place new bib records in the network. If you saw Z0 and your holding symbol there, that would have meant you was imported through the metadata editor with the placement settings as local. And so let's take a look again here. We can see if that was the case for those other ones that were in the institution zone only. So here's our first bib up, added on 4/30. So here we see Z0 JBE. So yes, what that means in the metadata editor, when you are searching external records, when you search WorldCat from the metadata editor, your placement options control the search and where the record is saved at the time. Normally, you want to, in probably 90% of the circumstances, when you're adding bibliographic records, you want to use network to add new records. Either you don't find the bib you need in the network, or maybe you do find the record you need and want to upgrade it. You want to use the network zone as much as possible. Now, these are special collection materials, so that does suggest using local is a better choice. Take a look at that in a moment. Excuse me, needed a moment there. So let's take another look for one of those records that you updated that had a series title added, and that also said Jones in it. So you mentioned that you were adding a 590 or 490 and an 800. So let's see if we can find records where this was added. So 6 of these. And let's go ahead and edit this record in the metadata editor so that it's more demonstrable here. So yes, as mentioned, this record was imported from WorldCat when you had the placement options set as local. Now, the reason you would do this in locally, as Eric recommended, and I don't disagree with that recommendation, is you're adding a series title that doesn't actually exist in nature, shall we say. These were not published published as such, other than Charles Edwin Jones is the publisher of these works. But your treatment of these, you deciding to treat these as a series is unique to your institution. And that's why including them as 490 and 800 is more of a local choice for your institution. Other institutions that might use this record wouldn't necessarily agree with that treatment. That's not the only way to go about doing this. The alternative way, which does allow you to still use the network, would be to incorporate local extension fields using probably 9XX fields to establish a local series, and then to also push data into Primo VE as well under that. That can get a little tricky because this is how you're doing the series. I mean, one option that some institutions do is, instead of for a local series or local collection like this, rather than putting it in a series entry, they put it in a subject entry, in which case it could be a 650 second indicator 7 and a local collection heading that looks like a regular subject heading and appears to users in the public, and that can even stand alone without necessarily being separate from the rest of the network. But let me demonstrate that, how that might look. 650 second indicator 7. You could do CE. Jones collection subfield 2 local subfield 5, and you could put JBE here, or you could put OMU there. Subfield 5 is reserved to say which institution does this heading apply for, and if it's something that we could instruct other institutions, they could say don't display a subject heading that has somebody else's subfield 5 there. And then the data is not lost, it's still there for your use, but wouldn't infringe on anyone else. That is a possibility. The other thing that could be done with both the 650 or with the 490 and 800 is that could be done as a local extension. And so here's an example of that. I could do editing action, add local extension. Let me call it, in this case, just call it a 590, just for convenience sake. And say C.E. Jones collection. That doesn't need any kind of other qualifier. And I believe I can say that if I say first local series entry, need to review Carly website. Remember what I assigned this to once upon a time. Documentation and technical services and local extensions. A good recommended place for local series entries, if that is how you would want to do it. We could call it 979, or we could call it 976. Why would we do a 976 for that? Because if we make a local extension for 976, and we can code it the same way as the 800, and we can also set up, is it Edward or Edwin? Let me push it, just Edwin there. You can create indexes on specific local extension fields. So say under physical titles, you can look for local fields that are added to this list, and that even can be, so we could say local series as an option. Here's an example of local control field 009. But another example of a local field where we have a custom search index is the Voyager bibliographic record ID, which is what you usually see in the 959 field. Anyway, you can create additional search indexes on those values, and then these local extension fields can also be added to your Primo VE display settings, so that it can appear just as the same as a 800 that you might create. Those are two different ways of going about it. Is one better than another? It depends on the importance of sharing the record. These appear to be very unique, since looking at these records, a lot of them were just added for the first time, and even the records that you added to the network zone looked like they were added for the first time, so that there's nobody else with these records and holdings necessarily. So if I click the memoirs here, and I click the network icon, and the held by is your institution. So let's go ahead and go back to that, and we will change this search to all titles and search the network. And rid of that extra line there and see how many times Charles Edwin Jones turns up as a publisher in the network overall. $70 titles, which is the same number as before. So far, we see just about all of them are held by one institution. That would be you. So, where do we go from here? In this case, I think this is clearly a special collection, and so there's nothing pressing about sharing these necessarily with the network, other than us wanting to make sure that people can find them, which they can. They would not be able to see that just through ALMA. If these records weren't in the network zone, people doing a search of, just like we just did, where a publisher contains a Charles Edwin Jones in the network, wouldn't churn up for that. But people would see that through the Union View. Searching all iShare libraries, they would find these just fine. I'm going to take a few minutes actually I'm going to save this one and the video and share this with you, and then I'm going to go back and relook at your other questions and try to answer those in print. So hang on, we'll get you more information. Ted. This is Ted. Talk to you later.